Hi, my name is Morten, and in this video we will be taking a look at index definitions in Ucommerce. With version 9 of Ucommerce and the introduction of the bold APIs, we had to come up with a concept that allows us to define what data we have on our different catalog models. Underneath the bold APIs, we have a concept called index definitions, which defines what will go in our search indexes. Out of the box, Ucommerce ships with an index definition for each of the catalog items that you want to be able to show on your storefront, and all of those will be placed in your search indexes, either in a Lucene index or an Elasticsearch index. The index definition defines for your products and for your categories, for your catalogs and stores and price groups, what data goes in there. Ucommerce ships with all the default data that you have on those items, and on top of that, Ucommerce also has the definition system, which is covered in another video that you can show if you're unsure what the definition system means. For the definition system, this is your custom data that you define, and thus you also have the responsibility to determine what of those fields goes in your index, how they are stored, how you can search for them, as well as if they are used in Facets or not. And that's what we're here to explore today in this video. So to go about this, I will create a product definition from scratch, and I will define some fields on there that we then also configure in our index definition that will also be used for Facets. In this way, you'll be able to see all the way through what goes on for your data. So the first thing I will do is I will create a new definition and a new product using this definition. So let's go down to settings and to definitions and to products. Down here you'll be able to create all your definitions. I will right click and click create, and that gives me the UI to create a definition for my products. In this case, I want to create two things. I want to create a SEO definition. For my SEO definition, I want to have two custom fields. I will have a description, and that's a multilingual field. And I will have the tag. These are just two random fields that I could come up with. And this is also to showcase how the definition works with inherited definitions and the like. And this because I know that all my pages will render with a SEO description and a SEO title and SEO tags and so on and so forth. This just showcases how you could use it. I also want to create a definition called shirt. And then my shirt will inherit the SEO definition. And my shirt here will further have a few fields. Let's just call this color. And one more field called fabric. Alright, so now my definitions are set up in my website that I wanted to. Now I can create a product using this definition. So let's try to create just a sync one. So I will go to my store, ucommerce.dk. In here I will create a new category called shirts. And underneath shirts I will now create a product of type shirt. Alright, so now I have my shirt. So let's take a look at my custom fields. I have my display name called shirt, so that's my URL, and my description here is maintained in a language specific way. So I can now set my description to be awesome shirt, and tags are shirt and wool and blue. And my fabric is wool, and my color of my shirt is blue. Alright, now we have created all the data for all the custom fields I created. If I have multiple languages, I only have one. Otherwise, I would be able to create an additional version of the product that goes into the language specific index, as indexes are stored per language. So now I have my data set up, and I set up my definitions and I set up my products. So now it's time to take a look at how we create the index definitions. So let's take a look at that. I am back in my Masterclass solution, and now I need to define my index definition, and that's something that we define via code. So code will determine what goes in the index and what does not. In this case, I will just create a new folder under my Masterclass solution. Let's call this search, and I will create a new class in here. And this will be called my product index definition. Alright, I have my class. Now I need to inherit the default product index definition. So let me inherit that one, and I will do that via the namespace associated with that, and that's ucommerce.search.definitions. And in here I have all the default definitions for all the different types of data that I'm storing in my index. None of the index setups here are comma specific, so it's more of a general framework API type thing where I can define what I need. It's all generic fields and data that will be stored in a generic index somewhere, either Lucene or Elasticsearch, and then all the commerce capabilities are of course built on top. So these will just surface the different types of data that I store in my store. So I will inherit the default products index definition, and in here I need to create my constructor, and then I will call base. So base will do a lot of default stuff like setting up a SKU for the index, setting up the name, and so on and so forth. So all the core data for my products has already been set up. If we try to explore the default products index definition very shortly, we will notice that it implements an interface with a generic argument. In this case, it's ucommerce.search.models.product, because this generic type here is the one that we get out, and that's also the one that we use in catalog context and in catalog library and so on and so forth when we start to work with the model at the other end, which is the presentation layer. So this will give us type-safe APIs to use to determine what we want to have in our indexes. Alright, so as you could see in the default products index definition, it just defines a lot of fields, and that's basically what we will do here as well. It's our job to figure out what of the custom data that I want to have in my index. Maybe the fabric, for example, would not make sense in my index. That's just an example of a piece of data that you want on a product in the database, but you don't necessarily want to store in the index. There could be various reasons for this, but it's up to me to figure out the data that I want to present is typically also what I want to have in my index. Before I get started, I want to include a few namespaces that are relevant for defining my index definitions. So I want ucommerce.search, I want ucommerce.search.definitions, I want ucommerce.search.extensions, and I want lastly ucommerce.search.facets. This allows me to set up all the different things in my index definition that I need. The first thing that I will include is the SEO title and the SEO description and tags and my fabric and my color. So I will call this .field. And this now gives me the ability to set up an expression that determines how I want to store my field and what field I want to store. So let's go back to my site here very quickly and see. Okay, I'm interested in 4 fields: the 2 fields from my SEO and the 2 fields for my shirt. So that's description, tag, color, and fabric. And I can do this in 3 different ways. First, I can say P. So my model here is also my generic argument that we had on the interface up here. So that's the type safety I get from this. So here I can say P, and then I can say color. And then I can say, okay, I want to store this in a type. So that is, for example, do I want to store it as a boolean, as a string? So it determines how the index stores it, and that also determines how I can use it for searching later on. In this case, I just want to store it as a string, like this. I'm also interested in another field on my product. So that's for example, its description, but that's not a type safe thing that I have here. If I want to do that, I can inherit the model and then define my own field as well to get the type safety. Up here, I really just have a key that I'm using, but it determines how it's accessed in my system. So here I just want to keep using the magic string, so to speak. So I want color, I want tag, I also wanted fabric and description. Those are the 4 fields that I created in the back office before. So now these 4 fields should automatically appear in my index once I start to query the data in a very short amount of time. So that's how I define my fields. I have one additional layer of configuration that I can have for my fields here, which is the ability to set the display names for the individual facets, for example. So if I want to show a facet in both English and Danish, I can define per culture code how the display name should look like. So let's try to do that just on one of the field. So I can say .display name, and that gives me the ability to set up a culture code. In this case, I just want E and US, and for that I want to have let's say disk, so that when I show my facets on the storefront, I will see the display name and not the actual description here. So the key description will be used for querying with facets, whereas disk will be used to present for the user. And in this case, for E and US, I would define a disk, whereas maybe for DK, it would be beskrivelse. So I can set up my facets to be per language. Of course, the key is unique and is used across all languages, but that's not really what we present for the user. That's the display name that I set up. Last thing that I want to set up here is that I can set up display name without a culture code. that should just be disk as well. And lastly, I need to call the method called Facet. This specifies for Ucommerce that this description field here should be a facet, and you should use these display names to present for the user. Alright, and that's actually more or less that for the fields and the facets. We will do some more advanced stuff later on, but for now we're just focusing in on the core thing, which is getting the fields in the index and defining my facets so I can start to do facets as well. And last thing, I also want to handle the price, and I do that with the field as well. And in this case, I want to call p.prices including tax. So typically Ucommerce stores prices without VAT in the back office, and that's also how they will appear in the index. I can also set up my prices including tax in my index, and the way that I do that is that I map it in a field called the price group name. So I need to make sure that I have a price group with this name so it will appear in the index. Then I'll call facet on that one, and then I can define for my facets that I want to have auto ranges. So that means that Ucommerce will automatically calculate all the ranges for my facets. That it's basically just a display concern for the price facet. So for each facet you're typically interested in all the unique values, but prices are a little more special because you don't want to have each individual price as a selection in the UI. Typically you're interested in a range. I want products spanning from 100 to 200 euros, or maybe I even want a slider and so on and so forth. The auto ranges here are only to have automatic ranges calculated and shown. I could also create my own special facet with a slider where the ranges doesn't necessarily have to match the selection that the user does. Maybe he wants to only see products from 100 to 110. So this is purely for display purposes. I set up how many ranges that I want, and I say that my precision is determined how it snaps. I don't want to have decimal values and such. I just want equal numbers. So these are my facets for my prices as well. And I actually think that this is it. We have one last thing that we need to do, which is we need to hook this into Ucommerce so it's picked up. It's not picked up automatically via the application. So we have to do a little special thing, which is register this as a component in the IOC container of Ucommerce. There's more about how IOC works in a later video for more complex and deeper knowledge of Ucommerce. For now, we'll just use it and not go into the details about what it actually does and what the actual thing that we do mean. But here I will create my folder. I will do that under the Ucommerce folder, which is placed under Umbraco and Ucommerce. And if you're watching this in another CMS, it's placed differently, but there will be a description where you can find the actual Ucommerce folder and where you need to place it. So now I'm just showing it here to you. And down here, you can find a little file called Umbraco Masterclass, or a folder called Umbraco Masterclass under apps. And in there, there's a Masterclass index definition. And we need to configure this, and it's out commented right now. We need to comment it in, and then we need to change one thing, which is the type. And the type is the namespace and the class name that we created. So my namespace is Umbraco Masterclass .search. And my class name is my product index definition. And I also need to specify the assembly name, which in this case is Umbraco Masterclass. All this may seem like voodoo to you. Don't worry, there will be a deeper technical explanation about what all this is. Otherwise, you can also find it on the docs side. For now, you just need to know that you have to do it, and then you can learn more about what it does later on. But basically here we are hooking into the extension system of Ucommerce, which sits on top of an I2C container called Castle Winter. If all that was black magic to you, fear not, you will be taught how it is and how it works. So I have this now. Now I just need to build my solution, and then we will take a deeper look at what we get out of the index, as well as creating the facets in the next video. This is how the index definitions are. There's more advanced things that you can do, which we will also cover in another video. But for now, let's just try to dive into the data that we get back from the index. I'm back at my website. I have compiled the solution, and now I can see my shirt category here on the front end. And when I click in on this category, I have my product one that I created with my price, and I don't have an image, so that one is blank. And if I take a very quick look at my product controller, which serves the product page, then we can see that we extract the current product up here. We did all this in the last videos. So let's try to click in on the product. And now my breakpoint here was hit after I took out the current product and I created my view model. So I defined in my product index definition the different fields that I wanted: color, tag, fabric, and description. So let's take a look at what we have on my current product here. So here we have the user-defined fields, and as we can see, there's 4 fields. There's color, description, fabric, and tag, matching what I set on my product and what I said in my definition that I wanted to have in here. If I want to have these out in a type-safe way, that is possible. I don't have it right now because it's of model.product, but if I inherit my product and I change my definition to index that particular model, then that is also what I will be getting back, so I can access my properties in a type-safe way. Let's not do this for now. You just have to know that it's there in the indexes, either in the Lucene index or the Elasticsearch index, and I can access them here. I can even, in my immediate window, I can access them here. So if I wanted to show some of it on the storefront, I could of course do that. I can access it with an indexer here, so I could say tag, and that gives me back the actual value of my custom defined field. Shirt, wool, and blue, and that's also what I was expecting. So now I have my custom data in my index. So that's actually it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and see you in the next one.